you very much. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this meeting of South Cambridgeshire District Council Scrutiny and Overview Committee. My name is Councillor Stephen Drew. I am chair of this committee. May I make a few housekeeping announcements? Those present, including any members of the public observing or any public speakers, are asked to note that this meeting is being filmed and live streamed. By your presence, you are deemed to have consented to be filmed and to the use of these images and sound recordings for a webcast. May I please remind members that when speaking they should not disclose any personal information of any individual, as this might infringe the rights of that individual and breach the Data Protection Act. Please make sure your microphones are switched off unless you are invited to speak. For those participating remotely, when you are invited to address the meeting, please make sure your microphone and camera are switched on, and then when you finish addressing the meeting, please turn your microphone off again. Please, would members who are attending the meeting remotely indicate a wish to speak through a chat message in the Teams meeting. Those present in the chamber should indicate they wish to speak by raising their hand. I will ask the Vice Chair to note the order of speakers both virtually and in the room. Committee members present in the chamber, I will now invite each of you to introduce yourselves. Members, after I call your name, please introduce yourself and say which ward you represent. As I said earlier, my name is Councillor Stephen Drew and I am one of the members for Camborne. My Vice Chair is Councillor Graham Cohn.
Thank you, Chair, and I'm one of the members for the Fen Ditton and Fulbourn ward.
Councillor Anna Bradnam.
Good evening, Chair. I'm Councillor Anna Bradnam and I'm one of the members for Milton and Waterbeach ward.
And attending for the first time after his recent election, Councillor Tom Boycott.
Thank you very much. So Councillor Tom Boycott representing Longstanton.
Sorry, Tom, you need to turn the mic on first. Apologies.
Very wise. Councillor Tom Boycott representing Longstanton, Northstowe, Oakington and Westwick.
Well, most welcome. Councillor Libby Earle.
Microphone. Councillor Libby Earle, representing Sawston ward.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Fane.
Peter Fane, Shelford ward.
Thank you. And Councillor James Hobro.
Good evening, Chair. My name's James Hobro. I'm the member for Foxton ward.
And Councillor John Lovelock.
Good evening, Chair. John Lovelock, one of the members for Cottenham and Rampton.
Thank you. And Councillor Richard Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. Richard Stobart. I'm member for Girton ward, along with my fellow councillor. Girton also includes Dry Drayton and Madingley.
Fantastic, thank you. And Councillor Aidan van der Waal.
Yes, I'm Aidan van der Waal. I'm representing the villages of Barrington ward.
Okay, and are there any other members present either in the chamber or online? I believe that Councillor John Williams is online.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Councillor John Williams, one of the members for Fen Ditton and Fulbourn ward, and also the lead member for Resources.
Thank you. And Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Heather Williams. I represent the Mordens ward and I'm substituting for Councillor Sue Ellington.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Helen Leaming.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Helen Leaming, one of the members for Camborne ward.
Excellent. We also have with us several officers in the chamber. Anne Ainsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Anne Ainsworth. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Council.
And Peter Maddock.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Peter Maddock and I'm the Head of Finance.
Ian Senior.
Thank you, and I'm the Scrutiny and Governance Advisor.
And Aaron Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Democratic Services Technical Officer.
Thank you. Online we have Peter Campbell.
Hello, Peter Campbell, Head of Housing.
Thank you. And Bodhi Assam.
Good evening all. I'm Bodhi Assam, Head of Climate, Environment and Waste.
Thank you. And Rory McKenna.
Good evening, Chair and members. Rory McKenna, and I'm the Monitoring Officer for the Council.
Okay, I believe that is everyone in terms of councillors and officers, unless anyone feels they have been left out. Ah, there you go. My apologies, Stephen. And Stephen Kelly. Excellent.
Hello, Stephen Kelly, Joint Director of Planning.
Okay, excellent. So I will try and make that statement again. I now believe that is everyone who is present either in the chamber or online. I'm looking at colleagues, nobody's shaking their head at me. We will consider that to be the case. Excellent. And move on to, sorry, I haven't finished my first bit. So, I can confirm that the meeting is quorate, there being at least 4 committee members here in the chamber. If at any time a member leaves the meeting, would they please make that fact known to me so it can be recorded in the minutes. Please note a small correction at item 7 of the agenda work programme. The local plan is now scheduled to go to Cabinet in February next year. The Scrutiny Overview Committee will now be meeting on Thursday the 12th of January, not Tuesday the 10th as previously published. Finally, a report from this meeting will be presented to Cabinet on the 6th of February 2023. If neither the Vice Chair nor I are able to attend this meeting, would any other committee members be prepared to act as spokesperson at Cabinet on the 6th of February 2023? Councillor Richard Stobart.
Shall I speak? I am due to have a regular meeting after Cabinet, so it seems appropriate that I go to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stobart. Unless anyone else would like to grapple Councillor Stobart for this responsibility? No. Excellent. Councillor Stobart is yours. We appreciate that. Thank you very much. Item 2 is apologies. Are there any apologies for absence?
There are several. From this committee, Councillors Ellington, Sally Ann Hart and Judith Repeth. And we also have apologies from the Leader of the Council, Bridget Smith, and Bill Handley, who's Lead Cabinet Member for Communities.
Thank you very much. And declarations of interest. Members are required to declare the existence and nature of any interest which affects or relates to any item of business to be considered. If the interest becomes apparent during the meeting, then the member should bring it to the attention of officers at that time. Do any members have interest to declare in relation to any item of business on this agenda? Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure how it would relate to any of the items, but as a general background, that I'm Director of South Cambridgeshire Investment Partnership, SCIP, and also South Cambridgeshire Project, SCP. May have some bearing, but we'll see.
Thank you very much. Always best to err on the side of caution. Any other members need to raise a declaration of interest at this point? No. So, if an interest subsequently becomes apparent later in the meeting, please raise it at that point. So, first of all, for minutes of the last meeting, committee members have had a chance to read the minutes. Are there any issues of accuracy? I understand that Councillor John Williams will be added to the attendance list, and that Councillor Fane would like to make a comment before I invite the Joint Director of Planning and Economic Development to respond. Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. I just felt that the minutes of the last meeting in relation to a particular point on planning didn't really pick up. I felt that the Joint Director of Planning was able to make some very useful, bring to our attention some very useful information. This is in relation to KPIs PN 510 to 512 when we discussed those. And I thought it was important that we capture the gist of those. There were also offers to bring further matters back to this committee or this meeting. And again, I felt it might be helpful to reflect that in the minutes. Forgive me, I've lost the exact wording of what I suggested.
I have the extract I can show on the screen. If that's...
That would probably be very helpful if Aaron Clark could do that. Yes, please.
Thanks very much.
And I then have...
Sorry, Chair, could we clarify? Are we being shown the suggested alternate wording?
So this is, yeah, so the top is the extract from the minutes as is.
Yeah.
And the suggested is below. Okay. Are you happy for me to scroll down?
Councillor Fane?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think I put the suggested wording in italics. Perhaps that doesn't reflect in here. But I don't think there's any need to record. Clearly, we don't record the whole discussion. The point was that the Director of Planning, in his reply was able to say that was able to refer to tables produced, I think, by Matt Hull, shows applications which fall outside the timescale, and he offered to explain further in a subsequent meeting of the committee. There was also, for me, Councillor Heather Williams raised some points to which, again, the director was able to give some very useful replies. And again, there was talk of I think you, Chair, offered to look at this and come back to this at a future meeting, but whether this one or some other meeting.
So I've had discussion with Stephen Kelly in preparation for today's meeting, and he is in a position to provide further information at this point. So I will refer to him now. Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, the question, I think the outstanding question, because there was a discussion on this point, was related to the percentage of applications that we were reporting that as in time that had been subject to an extension of time, because the process provides for in the government's performance statistics is either the decision is made in 8, 13 or 16 weeks, which is the kind of default, or in accordance with the timescale agreed with the applicant. And the question that was asked last time is how many of the applications that we were reporting as meeting that target, how many of them involved extensions of time. Now, I didn't have, at the time of the last committee meeting, I didn't have that information to hand, but I did highlight the fact that we do report it. And given that we were talking about Q2, I can, and the Q2 performance report, it seemed appropriate to pick July, August and September as the process for giving you some information about that. So in relation to major applications, 85% of the major applications had some form of agreement of an extension of time. That's not surprising because major applications generally involve Section 106 agreements and involve committee decisions. And so we do generally seek to work with a timetable with applicants. Of the minor applications and others, obviously much higher volume, but the corresponding figures are around 90% for minor applications. Those are up to 10 houses or slightly more complex commercial schemes. And that is quite a high figure at 90% of the 97 decisions that we issued in time, 148 decisions overall in July to September, but is partly a consequence of the ongoing programme of clearance of our backlog that accrued through COVID, that some of these applications with the agreement of applicants have agreed timescales for them. On the small schemes, on the householder type applications, single dwellings and so forth, around 69% of applications that were reported as being in time in the last quarter had extensions of time agreed with applicants. And we have until recently had a bit of a challenge in our validation team with a backlog of applications that at its peak was about 5 weeks. Now 5 weeks out of an 8-week programme made it very difficult to either bring things to committee or to undertake the consultation process. So we had to introduce more extensions of time than would be desirable. At the last meeting, I referred to the other KPI, which related to the average number of weeks for a householder application. And I indicated to the committee that we were looking at that much more focused as being a key indicator of what the experience of, or the lived experience of applicants in South Cambridgeshire was like. And in a way, that is a measure that we expect the government to increasingly start to focus on. It's not actually a formal measure at the moment as we head forwards. Part of the cause of the large number of extensions of time, there were overall 296 decisions in that quarter for householder applications in South Cambs. was, as I said, the validation backlog. But I'm pleased to report that as of this week, through the hard work of the team, there is no backlog in validation. There are something like 26 applications currently sitting waiting to be validated, compared with 300 that we had at our peak. And so we finished the year and indeed prepare for the four-day week trial in a very strong position from that, so that we hope to be able to ensure that the experience of people going forwards is of timely and prompt decision making and not waiting for not dealing with a backlog. Chair, what I would propose to do is to write and circulate to all members of the committee this information, because I've just given it to you verbally, and it can perhaps be recorded as the minutes. The second question was around non-determination appeals and how many of them, how many of the major applications had non-determination appeals. Whilst I've got one or two that I'm just checking the figures on, because the period is over 2 years, I don't believe that there's a significant number of them, but I'll have to confirm that in my note that I send on this in writing to the committee members in due course. But I anticipate that by the end of next week.
Okay, great, Stephen. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Fane, any further comments at this point?
Thank you, Chair. That was a very helpful explanation from Mr. Kelly, and I think it's important that our minutes should capture the essence of that.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, your hand was up a little bit earlier before Stephen Kelly spoke.
Thank you so much, Chair. The question that Councillor Fane identified was, he asked that the key performance indicators should differentiate between exactly those points that Mr. Kelly has helpfully made. He said that there should be a differentiation in the KPI. In other words, we should have one KPI for those that are determined within the period set by statutory targets, and one KPI for those set when there has been an extension of time. And I just wanted to ensure, and that is exactly what has been captured in the minutes. And so I just wanted to confirm that that was something that would be taken forward.
So we've received the information from Stephen Kelly there, which would provide the answer to that question going forward. So therefore, clearly that information is available, and we will look to make sure that that information is provided to members going forward.
A different thing. Stephen Kelly has offered to provide that to us for this data that he asked about, but what Councillor Fane was asking was that the key performance indicator in the register should include that differentiation. That's my understanding of what Councillor Fane
So hence why I'm saying that we will make sure that that is what is provided going forward in terms of that information. Okay. Are there any other councillors who wish to speak at this point before we move on to the next stage? I don't see any hands online. I don't see anything with Graham there. Okay. So therefore, accepting the amendment to the minutes that Councillor Fane has suggested, with then the answer suggested, given there, coming into the minutes, can I ask for agreement from councillors with the minutes as proposed, with the amendments that have been suggested?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, everyone agreed. Excellent. Thank you very much. I will just ask Ian, is that sufficiently clear what we have discussed there?
Absolutely. I'll write something out and share it with you and with Councillor Fane.
Absolutely. Just considering, obviously, we've had that conversation and the report, and then Councillor Braddon and I have discussed it further. So I want to make sure that we're all on the same page, as it were, in that regard. Excellent. Okay. Thank you very much. Which moves us on to point 5, which is the public questions. I apologise, I've lost my screen. So for public questions, we did receive one request from a member of the public to make a statement, which was refused as it was submitted late. So there are no public questions this evening. Which moves us on to point 6 on our agenda. Yes?
Just a matter of observation. I think you might be finding that your computer, your laptop, is actually blocking the microphone.
Okay.
It might be helpful to put the microphone to one side.
So is it your view that I need to move my microphone in front of the computer?
It helps to balance.
Okay, then I shall do that for you. Okay.
Oh, sorry, no, I meant the other way, where you had it previously.
Oh.
Very well, sorry, Jim.
Okay.
It's just
So
Sound difference.
that's actually better.
Yes.
I shall try not to take that in any other way than it being helpful. Okay, excellent. So that brings us then to point 6, which is the General Fund Medium-Term Financial Strategy, which obviously we've helpfully provided with both document and the Appendix A and Appendix B. So at this point, I shall open up to questions from members who would like to go first. Councillor Bradnam, you are first, and obviously anyone else, please raise your hand or put the message in the chat, and Councillor Kane will note you down. Councillor Bradnam.
Sorry, would we normally receive the report from Mr. Maddock first?
Okay, what we have been doing for the last few meetings is we haven't been asking for officers to make a presentation. If in advance of the meeting, officers who have the report request that they will make a presentation, then we will provide them with time. But otherwise, the assumption would be that members have read and that the officer is confident enough that it will be clear in that regard. But obviously, there may be occasions when it's necessary.
Okay, that's fine. So I just wanted to ask Mr. Maddock, at item 17 on page 15, at the bottom of the paragraph, it was referring to the fact that the Bank of England base rate has been increasing during the financial year 2022-23, with the base rate now at 3%. But of course, as of today, I think it's gone up to 3.5%. And I wondered whether you will need to adjust the figures or whether you think that your figures are robust enough to cope with that. Thank you.
Thank you. So in the medium-term financial strategy, we have assumed that interest rates next year are going to reach 5%, and that will be the rate on which we will be borrowing at. So as regards to figures, we won't need to change that, but obviously potentially we'll need to change this paragraph. As you say, that rate has now changed, so yeah, we'll make the change to the paragraph, as you say. So yeah, the assumption we've used is that we will be borrowing at 5% during 23-24.
Okay. Councillor Bradnam, are you happy to move on?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent, thank you very much. So, colleagues, when we're asking questions, obviously, if we wish to ask directly to Peter Maddox, is absolutely fine. Otherwise, I will go to Councillor John Williams in the first instance, who may well then, as we know, pass on to one of the officers. So, and if I can just raise on behalf of a number of councillors who just raised this, was that it was noted that a number of the tables in the report went over more than one page. So therefore, councillors would just like to flag the fact that it would be extremely helpful if we could do everything we possibly could to ensure that tables appear on single pages. I think this is a reflection of our ability to read tables rather than the contents of the tables. So that is said with a bit of humility on part of councillors. Excellent. Okay, next up is Councillor Cone.
Thanks very much, Chair. My question was regarding the general reserve and the funds that we've got in that. I just wanted to really ask Peter Maddock the detail behind how accessible those funds are, and whether we could, lay our hands on those funds quickly, or are they tied up in assets and so forth.
Okay. So we will go to Peter first of all. Councillor Williams, you have not been called upon as yet.
Thank you. So the sort of funds we have invested, we have around 50 million invested at the moment. Some of that is sort of 2-3 year terms. It's generally relatively short, but on easy access, sort of 3 million, we've got around 15 million at the moment. We have a minimum of 7 million, so we would always take the view that we should have 7 million readily accessible cash at any one time, but we are exceeding that at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Cohen, are you happy to?
Happy to move on, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Hobro.
Hello, thank you, Chair. So I have a question, but actually I noticed a small typo, and as the Douglas Adams fan, I'm delighted to report it's on page 42, line A, the year 2034, I think should read 2023. So on to my question. So this really relates to Councillor Bradham's question about interest rates. So we heard today that interest rates are increasing by another 0.5% to 3.5%. Inflation has been going up, of course, and it's predicted to peak soon, but there are large uncertainties in the sort of the curve that we're expecting inflation and consequently interest rates to follow over the coming year or two. And then there are corresponding uncertainties in the sort of GDP trajectory. So, I mean, these issues are all referred to. So I found them in paragraph 12 on page 14, and again in paragraph 16 on page 15, and paragraph 51 on page 22. So it seems to me that these uncertainties are captured by the alternative scenarios presented in paragraphs 55 and 56 on pages 22 and 20 to 24, where there are 3 pessimistic scenarios and 1 optimistic scenario that are given. Please forgive me if I've not understood that correctly, because this is the first one of these reports that I've read. But so the scenarios that are explored involve anything between 2.5% and 10% increase or decrease in various elements of yield or demand in the figures. So this brings me on to the question. It's not really clear to me how these yield and demand figures relate to the uncertainty in the economic outlook for the things like inflation, interest rates, and GDP. And so my question really is, how have those uncertainties been mapped to the 4 scenarios, if that's what has been done? And how confident can we be that these 4 scenarios capture the range of likely economic outcomes well enough that we're adequately anticipating the economic uncertainties of the next year or two? Thank you.
Councillor Williams, I don't know if you want to answer in the first instance or pass over to Peter again.
I'm happy to pass over to Peter, who will explain how we arrived at those scenarios. But I have to say that you know, our experience in the past has been that we have been very good at forecasting, and indeed the outcomes have always been better than the worst case scenarios, and certainly I consider the worst case scenario as being an outliner, and that the baseline has in general normally been the outcome that we have achieved. So, but I'll leave it to Peter to explain in detail how we come about these scenarios.
Thank you, Councillor John Williams. Peter Maddox.
So thank you. Yeah. So scenarios that we've modelled are the ones we believe are the ones that we should use, because we did actually look at some scenarios. So, for example, with business rates, we did look at a 20% reduction, and obviously that produced quite a big variance. We did actually then come to the conclusion that actually it was pretty unlikely that we would see a 20% reduction. So we moved those down to 2.5%, 5% and 10%. And I guess the difficulty with any of this scenario modelling is that there's quite a range of possible scenarios you could put in. So what we've tried to do, as best we can, is pick the ones that we think are the most likely variances, rather than some real outliers, which we have looked at in the past. Of course, there's been so much uncertainty, as you rightly point out, particularly over the last 3 to 4 months, and it has been quite a lot of work, a lot of revisiting over that time to come up not only with the actual figures we're presenting in the table, but also in the scenarios. And I think it's probably fair to say I've not seen as much volatility and uncertainty in all my years in local government. And I can confidently say that the figures I present here, by the time we get to next week, will change yet again. So, you know, the scenarios that we've modelled are the ones we believe are the most likely. But even then, it's based on a lot of assumption. And, you know, with all the volatility that we've had, it's quite difficult to pin down, you know, which scenarios we should run with and which ones we shouldn't. So, so that's the ones we've run with. We've tended to use those scenarios over the last 2 to 3 years, and generally, as Councillor Williams said earlier, we've not seen anything that's quite matched the worst case scenarios. So I'm as confident as I can be that the worst case scenarios that we're modelling here won't come to fruition. But I probably, if you'd have asked me 6 or 7 months ago where interest rates were going to the rates they are, I wouldn't have said that. So, I'm as confident as I can be that the scenarios that we've modelled are the ones we should stick with.
Thank you. Councillor Hobro, do you have a further question, or are you happy for us to move on?
No, I don't. I'm very happy to move on. Thank you. Thank you very much for the answer.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Stobart.
Thank you, Chair. So it's a comment and a question. So it's strongly related to what Councillor Hobro has raised. But just by way of, I suppose, clarification for me, the notion of risk assessment is kind of woven through the report. And I noticed paragraph 34, you talk about modelling using very reliable source of data. You underline the uncertainty in the current circumstances, and then the table, which we were just talking about in paragraph 55, page 22. So I did have a question about scenarios, which I'll come on to in a moment, but just proceeding to paragraph 70, there's a discussion of the risks. There's a savings risk, an economic conditions risk, and a climate change risk. So I was intrigued as to how all this was woven together. So just to come back to the scenarios point, how are the scenarios triggered? How do you observe the data? When does that happen, and how does it happen? And then when thinking about the risks, how are the scenarios related to the risks? So if we said, we've run out of the capacity at South Cambridgeshire to make savings, how could that be related to one of the scenarios that's proposed in the table, for example? So it's about the mechanics, how when a risk appears, does it switch a scenario in and out, and then how are the actions taken? And do those risks, for example, appear in the risk register with a red, amber, green light that would trigger a review at high level? So I hope that's clear, but probe me still further if it's not.
Thank you. Councillor John Williams, anything to add initially?
Thank you, Chair. I think it's fair to say that this is kept under constant review, although it says in paragraph 70 that the council that we expect the head of finance to present a report twice a year. That this is constantly being watched, and so all those various factors are under constant review. And clearly, should there be an indication that something is not that the risk on a particular item has changed, then that will be brought to my attention by the head of finance, and clearly action will be taken to notify cabinet and to seek a change in our in our working. But for the purpose of this paper, clearly this looks forward for the next. This is the position as of now for the next 6 months. And as Peter Maddock has said, given that we don't know yet what the local government financial settlement is going to be, that will be announced on December the 21st, that this is most likely to change anyway within the next few weeks. So the report that will come to council in February will not be this report. So I think what I'm trying to say is that everything is fluid, particularly in the current financial circumstances, but it's under constant review, and therefore action can be taken at any time. We don't wait for this report to come out, or we don't review things every 6 months. They are under constant review.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Peter Maddox.
Yeah, so we have on our risk register, for example, that I think that came to the last audit committee, the strategic risk register, we have a risk around economic pressures in relation to the budget. So obviously that has a bit of information in it about how we manage those sort of risks, and that will be coming to audit committee every 6 months. So we're reviewing that on a regular basis. I think the biggest risk probably facing us as a council is the fair funding review that's potentially coming in 25-26. The fair funding review has been spoken about over the last few years, and there's potential for funding to switch away from district councils to counties, particularly to fund social care. So that's certainly the biggest risk that we face, and I think it's becoming more and more apparent that that will actually happen in 2025, 26. So, and in order to meet that challenge, clearly from the council's point of view, the best way to meet that challenge is to make savings or increase income. So I think in paragraph 69A, we talk about savings. So there obviously is a risk that at some stage we'll make savings, and at some point we won't be able to go any further with that. But we're certainly confident over the next couple of years with the transformation programme that we've got in train at the moment that we'll be able to deliver significant savings over that period. I mean, automation and service reviews are sort of driving force behind that. But I think there's always a risk that, you know, you can cut things so far, you know, you can review, get efficiencies, particularly with technology, but at some point, you know, it will become increasingly difficult. And I certainly think something we need to look at over the next few years potentially is income generation, being can't say the word innovative around income generation, because clearly if we can increase our income, that's much less painful than cutting services. So I think whilst looking at savings through efficiencies is clearly the way to go, I think we also need to look at income generation. So I think that there is a real risk at some point that we will get to a stage where we can't cut things any further. We mentioned the economic landscape. I mean, there's been so much uncertainty, and you know, 12 months ago, I don't think any of us would have predicted where we are now. So there's clearly a risk that things will potentially get worse. Most of the commentators I've been reading and talking to are sort of suggesting that things are going to improve, probably at some stage next year or you know, towards the end of next financial year. So I think we're expecting to see interest rates peak next year, sort of around the sort of 5% mark, before then dropping back. So we have a sort of a risk around interest rates that potentially is a shorter term risk than perhaps some of the other risks. As regards climate change, then, you know, again, we need to develop more sophisticated modelling, I think, around the impacts of climate change. Clearly, there's things within our business plan to do what we can to mitigate against climate change. We do review, as Councillor Williams said, we review the medium-term financial strategy formally twice a year, but we do look at the figures on a regular basis. I think it's probably fair to say over the last 4 months I've revisited the figures at least 5 or 6 times. So, you know, and again, the risks are changing over time, and there's clearly a lot more risk and a lot more volatility in the figures now than at this time last year, simply because of the situation we find ourselves in. I think it's probably the most difficult time to assess where our income and expenditure is going and I'm prepared to accept that the figures presented to you this evening, are against a backdrop of significantly more risk than in the past, and consequently, there's likely to be some significant change to those figures. We've got the settlement, we think, coming on the 21st of December. Indications are that it's probably going to be slightly better than I've assumed in the medium-term financial strategy. So some of the pessimistic scenarios around the settlement do look as if they might be, it's not going to be as bad as perhaps we thought. But I don't want to say too much until that comes out. But the real problem will be 25, 26, and that's when we think things probably are going to hit councils, particularly district councils, and we need to prepare ourselves for that. Hence, the savings and things that we're doing at the moment to try and get us in the best position for that. Not sure I can add too much. I mean, we monitor the risks on a regular basis, and I will be revisiting this next week, and probably again in January, and then in February we will have a version of the medium-term financial strategy when our 23-24 budget is set, and by the end of January we'll have a pretty clear idea of our business rates income figures for next year as well. So it's quite near to the budget setting process when we actually have the certainty on our income for next year, which always makes forward planning quite difficult. So,
thank you, Peter. Councillor Stobart, any further points?
Thank you, Chair. Just a brief follow-up question. Thank you very much. That's a really nice, helpful picture. Sometimes things come in twos. The lightning strikes twice. And I wonder about the value of not anticipating, because by the very nature these things can't be anticipated or legislated. But if there were to be, as there have been, economic shocks at the time of, for example, some kind of significant series of climate events, then we have these two factors in play. And I wonder if, as part of the scenario setting process, a few of those might be considered because their impact would be quite novel. So it's just a suggestion. I mean, South Cambridge District Council, not a big multinational firm, and so the nature of risk is different, but nevertheless the environment is particularly complicated, and tracking multiple things which might happen at the same time might be challenging. So it's really a comment, but perhaps a suggestion that we might consider multiple things, for making certain types of planning development.
So you're happy for that just to be a comment, not for Peter to respond at all? Excellent. Okay, so happy to move on. Thank you. Okay, next up is Councillor Bygod.
Thank you, Chairman. So just looking on page 41, it looks as though the sort of main issue for us to be concerned about is the retained business rates on the second line from 25-26 onwards. And just sort of, it's really sort of a presentational thing, really. Just sort of reading that table, it sort of reads that we retain part of the rates and then the government takes the rest. But if we look at page 20, paragraphs 42 and 43, it talks about the proposed increase in local business rate share to 75% from 50%. But looking at the way the numbers go, that seems as though the government's taking 75 rather than 50. And I just wonder if there's a sort of a way of presenting that doesn't, I mean, obviously it's such a big number that people are probably not going to get confused which way around it is. I just wonder if we could present that slightly better, and also just if you could give us a little bit more of your thoughts, just a bit more of a description about how that process works and what the sort of likely possible other outcomes might be.
Would you like me to go straight to Peter for that rather than going to Councillor John Williams?
whichever.
So, I go to Councillor John Williams in the first instance. I don't know if there's anything you want to add before we go to Peter.
No, not really, except that obviously every year we face this. But as Peter Maddox has said, I think that given the crisis in the care crisis, the upper tier councils are at some point going to receive more funding, and that will be at the expense of district councils. So, you know, I agree with Peter Maddox that, you know, this is going to happen at some point. Fortunately, it's been put back every year, but I think we're into a situation now where I think it's pretty certain that there will be a fundamental shake-up in local government finance. So I think it's right that we should, you know, prepare for this and have that in our strategy.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor John Williams. Peter Maddox.
Thank you. So the fair funding review was first mooted to come in from 2021-22, so you can see how long it's been, how many times it's been delayed. And as part of that review, central government were proposing that with business rates it was going to be a reform that instead of 50% local, 50% central government, it will then go to 75% local, 25% central government, as you mentioned earlier. But it's pretty clear that as part of that process, all of the additional 25% will end up going to counties for social care, plus some of the existing 50% that we get. Hence, although when I say local, it basically staying within the local government sector rather than, or local government and fire sector, rather than, you know, just districts or just counties. So I think we will see the reduction overall in our income, but also in moving to 75%, all of that additionality we're expecting to go to county to help with social care funding. And certainly at the outset, when this was first announced, that was one of the clear intentions of the fair funding review to reevaluate the business rate system in particularly, because I think when local business rates came in back in 2012, even at the time I thought the share that the districts got was probably slightly disproportionate to that the counties got. And you know, more than 10 years later, we're looking at addressing that. So I think it's difficult to, I mean, maybe a bit more explanation around how that's actually working might be helpful, because I take your point. It seems slightly perverse that we're saying there's 75% now instead of 50% coming to local government. Yeah, our figures are going down, but actually it's the fact that the counties are going to get all of the additional 25%, and we're also going to lose some of our existing to county as well. So I can probably make that a bit clearer as to what's actually happening there, just so members are aware what the intention actually is.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bygott, are you content with the answer, or is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, great, thank you very much. Really appreciate that additional bit of detail. I think, yeah, if you could just put a few words in the document, I think that would actually explain it really well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next up is, before we move on to the next one, if I can just note that Councillor Sunita Hansraj has joined the meeting, and just ask if you could introduce yourself.
I am Sunita from Histon, Impington and Orchard Park.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hansraj. And our next question is from Councillor Heather Williams. I'm going to judge that. It's very difficult to decide what is the appropriate length of time to wait, isn't it? So what I'm going to do is we shall, obviously, Councillor Heather Williams, if you can hear us and are unable to contribute, we will come back to you in a moment. Is there anyone else who wishes to ask a question in relation to this item? Councillor Fane.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I wonder if we could turn to paragraph 15 on page 15. And as has just been explained by Mr. Maddock, the problem really arises as things stand in 2025-26. That's shown at Appendix B referred to there. When for the reasons that have just been explained, there's a sudden fall off, likely to be a sudden fall off in the retained business rates, combined as it happens with the effective ending of the new homes bonus. Now, my worry is that, as we've just been hearing, there is continuing uncertainty even within one government, and we're always expecting further statements which will radically alter this. But if we get to a situation in 2025-26, I'm looking now at page 17, bottom of page 17, top of page 18, and you'll see the reduction in the retained business rates referred to there, the ending of the new homes bonus and other factors. So suddenly we go from a relatively healthy position to a net resource deficit of 3.26 million. Well, if we're very dependent on political uncertainty, there is a certain event likely to happen in 2024 which might add to rather than reduce business uncertainty. And I'm wondering at what point, but since we clearly can't anticipate the outcome of such political changes, at what point we have to make radical changes, even in the face of uncertainty, to prepare ourselves for that likely eventuality. I don't know whether my question is clear.
I will go to Councillor John Williams in the first instance.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You're absolutely right, Councillor Fane, that we need to be prepared for that, and that's what we are currently doing. And in fact, we've been preparing for that, as Peter Maddox explained. You know, every year for about the past 4 years, we have been expecting this fair funding review to happen within 2 or 3 years of setting the MTFS. And we have been making preparations, but not just in regard to transforming the council's services and productivity and therefore savings, but also in diversifying our investment income so that we're not solely reliant on Ermine Street and our investment and investing in financial institutions such as banks. But we have sought to broaden our commercial investments to bring in additional income. Now, we've had some issues recently with that because the government has been trying to prevent us from doing that through changes to the Public Works Loan Board regulations. They believe good reason, because certain councils have taken on board very risky commercial ventures, and as a result, there have been some councils that have faced, in layman's terms, bankruptcy as a result. So the government has been very nervous about local government investment. However, the changes that they have made has stymied councils like South Cambs that have been taking a very reasonable approach to commercial investments and has been quite successful in delivering commercial investments while keeping the risk of those investments low. And as a result, over the last 2 or 3 years, we have actually received some £3 or £4 million in income from commercial investments that weren't there before the change of administration in 2018. So we have been preparing for this eventuality, and we'll continue to do so. And we are continuing to look at the transformation programme. We're continuing to look at further investments which we can undertake within the new criteria of the Public Works Loan Board. And also we're looking for investing in financial institutions that give us a better rate of return, particularly now we are seeing interest rates increase, because there is the other side of the coin to this. While our borrowing costs increasing interest rates also mean we get more income from our investments in banks and other financial institutions. So we are constantly looking at that to endeavour to make up that difference that we predict will happen when the fair funding review comes in, and we lose that income from retained business rates.
Thank you, Councillor John Williams. A comprehensive answer. Peter Matz, I don't know if you have anything to add in relation to that, or is that covered all the points?
I think that's covered most of it. I mean, I think the figures do look quite stark, particularly going from 24, 25 to 25, 26. One thing we haven't included in the MTFS is that when there's a change like this, there tends to be a sort of couple of years of what they call damping. So you get some additional grants to soften the blow. Now, the last time we had any significant review like this, and it was quite a long time ago now, I do remember there were 2 years where you know, your funding assessment was put down to a lower level, but you only lost a third of it, followed by 2/3, and then you settled on the new assessment. So I am expecting something similar to happen in reality, though we've not factored this in here just in case it doesn't happen. Yeah, as Councillor Williams said, you know, we're doing everything we can to prepare for 25, 26 when we expect to see the reduction. And actually, you know, the council are in a reasonably strong position compared to a number of other councils to meet the challenge. But I don't think, you know, we don't want to underestimate the challenge that does lie ahead. And you know, I think we all know this will happen in 25, 26 now. I know we've been saying this for a few years, but I think given everything that's happened over the last couple of years and what the economic climate looks like and what inflation looks like at the moment, I think we're pretty certain this finally will happen in 25, 26. So we just need to make sure we're ready to meet that challenge.
Okay, thank you very much. And that came from Councillor Fane. Councillor Fane, any further points on that, or happy to move on?
Well, just a brief comment, if I may. It's unfortunate that the specific period of uncertainty comes immediately after a likely political change in 24, but I welcome the work that the lead councillor and Peter Matt and his team are doing, particularly with the investment strategy, to make us less dependent on these sort of political uncertainties than many other councils are likely to be by then.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we'll go back to Councillor Heather Williams, who I'm informed is available now.
Hi, hoping my internet is working now. Can you hear me okay?
We can definitely hear you, Councillor Heather Williams.
Okay, I hope you'll excuse, I won't dare to put my camera on just in case. It's been very interesting to listen to everyone's comments. My question is more of a practical one about the recommendation. And we did raise this on a paper before about, obviously this is a cabinet report that we've got in front of us, about having a sort of a covering note for scrutiny as to what the recommendation, what we're being asked to do. I assume as Cabinet has already recommended it to full council that scrutiny is just commenting and noting, but just for sort of transparency reasons and for committee members, I think it'd be really helpful to know what the actual request is of committee today and have that documented. So it's a real practical question or comment from myself. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Heather Williams. Councillor John Williams.
Thank you, Chair. Well, this, as Councillor Williams has said, this has actually gone to Cabinet, and Cabinet have agreed to recommend it to full council. And as we've said, in a way, this is a draft because it will change as a result of the settlement that will be announced on the 21st of December. So what will actually go to full council in February may well not be this report that you have before you. So I can only, I can only say that in those circumstances, I believe that you can only note it rather than do anything else, because it certainly will not be the report that will go to full council in February.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Williams.
Thank you, Chair. I think that was some of my point, but it was the question I was asking is around transparency and requirements of the committee. So can we have an agreement for a cover note if it is a report that we're looking at for other committees, and then everybody knows and the public knows what we're actually being asked to do as a scrutiny body? Because if I was looking at the agenda today, I would not know what it was that was being asked of us. I completely agree with Councillor John Williams, and those in the chamber will know that's quite a rare thing, that this committee can only note this. This is a document that only Cabinet can put to full council. So it's knowing where the route and the process is. Just want to make sure for members of the public and others that keep a very close eye, obviously, on what we're doing, quite rightly, that we are clear. So my request was not what should we do. It's very clear we have to note it, but can we please have that documented and making it clear the recommendations to this committee when we have agenda items on this and anything else where we're just noting a report from another committee. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I was going to at that point just say, is there anything anybody else wish to say before I kind of almost move forward on Councillor Heather Williams' point? Councillor Bradnam, your hand was up at that point, so we'll have a little discussion in relation to the point Councillor Heather Williams has made.
Thank you, Chair. I simply wanted to observe that in our general terms of reference, our purpose as a Scrutiny and Overview Committee is to observe and make any suggestions for amendments that we think might improve the paper before it goes to its next step, whatever that is. And I think I can understand Councillor Heather Williams, maybe in this particular case, and maybe others wanting that to be clarified because of the way the recommendation is worded on page 13. But I think we have made some suggestions to this paper to improve, quite simply, some of the formatting, and we've asked questions of it, and we've had some clarifications, and Peter Maddock has accepted that there's one element where an extra bit of text might be helpful. So I think we've done our job here, haven't we? We've suggested some amendments which might be helpful as it goes to its next step. Thank you.
So my suggestion then would be that when it just almost adds a sort of just an extra question perhaps for myself and Councillor Cohn to ask when Ian Senior, as the officer supporting the committee, puts forward the agenda and the papers on behalf of Cabinet or others for the committee, that perhaps Councillor Cohn and I just make sure that we're absolutely clear about exactly what the committee is doing, if it is necessary for that. But as you say, Councillor Badman, it may be the case that it isn't necessary. But I think, Councillor Heather Williams, is that a fair interpretation of what you're suggesting, that Councillor Cohn and I take that as an action going forward, working with Ian Senior, if it is necessary, just for it to be more clear perhaps than it has been up to now?
Yes, thank you, Chair. And I don't think just a cover note for when it's scrutiny with Cabinet papers behind would be sufficient, just to make it really clear. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Heather Williams. I now have Councillor Leeming.
Thank you, Chair. I was considering our role as overview and scrutiny in terms of
risk management and our overview function. And hearing the comments repeatedly in various forms about unprecedented volatility and risk that we're facing for reasons that are outside our control. I would like to ask that an option remains open for subsequent financial papers or iterations could return to overview and scrutiny, potentially on a more timely basis, if material changes or risks materialise, reflecting on the situation that we're in now.
Councillor John Williams in the first instance.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I don't see any reason not to do that. Bearing in mind, though, that we have to programme the officers' workload, and an awful lot of effort and time is spent on preparing reports for your committee as well as other committees. So I wouldn't want them to be constantly having to come to this committee with an updated report for every time there is a change in the circumstances. But I think there is a point that should something happen between now and the next review, that should be brought to your attention. But that's something that I think Mr. Maddock and I will have to discuss to see, and indeed with yourself, to see how meaningful that could be.
Okay, Councillor Leaman.
Thank you, Chair. And I completely take the point that small changes or any changes would be completely inappropriate. But I think perhaps I'm just reflecting on the level of risk that is around at the moment, and I'm speaking about material changes, significant things that may benefit from future scrutiny.
Thank you, Councillor Leamy. Next question comes from Councillor Lovelock.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I've been reading more carefully, and I think I've answered my own question from the text in the document. And there's a point of information I'd like, but I'll take that out of the meeting.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions from any other councillors? Councillor Stobart.
It was, Chair, it was a comment relating to Councillor Leaming's point, which I think is very well made. But in the subsequent discussion, perhaps this could be addressed to Councillor John Williams and Peter. Is there a trigger condition that we could agree whereby a report is revised or some section is revised and presented to the committee? Hard to identify what the trigger conditions might be, but perhaps if the committee could agree those triggers, then it's all kind of regularised. And we are in the business, I think, of trying to manage officers' workload at the moment. So if it could be made, in a sense, more predictable, that might be a good thing.
Yes, I mean, it strikes me that there are always kind of two sides to this, in terms of there are things that you can set a specific trigger for, which are very, very clear. But I would always kind of think that we would operate on the whole principle of transparency and openness and welcoming scrutinisation of our work, whether it be public scrutinisation of our work of councillors, or whether it be the work of councillors on their committees and scrutinising the work of cabinet and officers generally. So that therefore, in the same way as Councillor John Williams has just said, that yes, it would definitely be a sensible thing for it to come back whenever it was appropriate to do so. There is an element by which we look to cabinet members and officers to be able to recognise the value of the work of whichever committee it is, scrutiny, overview or audit or whatever, and to seek to bring that back for input whenever that is necessary to do so. That is difficult to judge as an absolutely specific thing, isn't it? Because that can't really have a trigger of figures. That relies to some extent on Councillor John Williams and Peter Maddock making the judgment that that's the case. I sense from our discussion this evening that councillors are pleased to receive the report, and there's lots of interesting things that have come up, and that hopefully it will come up again to be discussed. Okay, is there anything anybody else wish to add? Councillor Bradman.
Thank you, Chair. I was going to confirm, my understanding is the same as yours, and that is that the very nature of unpredictability is that it's unpredictable, and therefore it would be hard to judge a time when something should come back. I appreciate what Councillor Stobart is suggesting is a numerical trigger, but that would maybe also be hard to predict. And so I think we leave it in the hands of the lead member for finance and our lead finance officer to determine if they think a change is sufficiently great that it needs to come before us again. The only other thing I would suggest is that, given that and this may be too soon, of course, but given that the Greater Cambridge Local Plan, we've been told that's been moved to the February meeting, I wondered whether there is any room to move it, have a planned return to this committee anyway, because things will have changed in between times, sometime before the budget is finalised, so sometime in January or February. I don't know if that might be helpful.
I think actually, well, I know that the Greater Cambridge Local Plan meeting has actually moved from the 10th to the 12th of January. So it does remain in January, it's not actually moved into February. But there are other meeting slots that we can definitely use.
Yes, so we could maybe bring it back in January or February if it was felt to be were important.
Excellent, great, thank you very much. I feel as if I'm asking just one more time. Peter, is there anything you wanted to add? Sorry, Peter, I didn't see you at the corner of my eye there.
No, that's fine. In the January meeting, we'll be bringing some budget papers to this committee, and we can give an update.
That's the 19th of January.
Sorry, 19th of January,
yes.
Yeah. So as part of that report, we can give an update on where the figures have changed, particularly as we'll know the settlement, or we'll know the provisional settlement at least by that stage.
Thank you.
Okay.
Councillor Stobart, the final comment there that that Peter Maddox has made, that it will come back on the 19th to some extent, is that suitable at this point?
Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you very much. I don't see anyone else. Excellent, okay, so bear with me because now I will ask my question. As ever in my head, there are many, many questions, but I'd like to point out that once again, I'm always pleased to find that my colleagues ask so many of the thoughts that are in my head, and always makes me feel I might be on the right track with these things. If I could just reference, please, probably to Councillor John in the first instance, on point 27 of Appendix A, I think, which is about growth prospects. It talks about, obviously, the council managing to work in response to lots of growth activities that are going on. And I'm just interested to know the extent to which you feel that these growth activities that the council can engage in have the potential to close some of the funding gaps that are referred to in the medium-term financial plan, or whether or not you think that actually this is unlikely to be able to solve significant parts of the shortfall that we face. Councillor John Williams in the first instance.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Quite a difficult question to answer at this point in time, but all I can say is that we are always looking for not just savings, but looking for income, and that includes investment income, as well as looking at borrowing, looking at loans to other organisations. I think at this moment in time, it is clear, looking at the Greater Cambridge area, we are certainly probably the growth area for the UK at the moment. So there is the potential there over the coming, 5 years to see economic growth in the Greater Cambridge area, delivering for us additional income from, as I say, investments or other sources. So I think I'm quite optimistic that we are very fortunate in South Cambridgeshire, in where, in the fact that we are in an area which is considered to will continue to have economic growth, regardless really of the the condition of the rest of the country in a strange sort of way. So we are in a very privileged position, and therefore I think we can feel that there will be opportunities in future. Whether or not those will deliver the sort of returns that will enable us to offset the deficit, that's another, I can't predict that. But we will do everything we can to make sure that we can do that.
Very much. And just to follow up on that, it's just at the bottom of point 28 on the investment opportunities, where it says investment opportunities solely for yield, i.e. acquisition of commercial assets, is not part of the Council's capital strategy. Would I be correct, Councillor John Williams, in understanding that that is maybe a part of the answer you gave earlier about how the Council has engaged in a more responsible and managed strategy, which is perhaps not the one that we expect to be influenced by changes of government policy where they have sought to control more risky activities by councils? Is that perhaps in line with that?
That's in line with the changes to the Public Works Loan Board rules, which it doesn't. The government hasn't prevented us from borrowing money elsewhere for ventures that are purely for gain. However, if we do that, it says that we won't then be able to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board. So technically it hasn't stopped us from doing that, but actually in reality it has, because we need to borrow from the Public Works Loan Board in most circumstances, because the interest rate from the government is much better than we would get elsewhere. So we would be foolish to throw that opportunity away. Therefore, we have to keep within the rules of the Public Works Loan Board, and those rules say that we should not borrow purely for commercial gain, or purely for for yield. So, as a result of that, that means that we can't go and buy a commercial property purely for its income. But that doesn't mean to say that we can't go and develop or go, as we've done with 270 Cambridge Science Park, where we've taken over a property and converted it to make it more suitable for what startups and the biotech industry in Cambridge wants. So we've converted it from a single unit to 5 separate units, and as a result of that, we can say that we are spending that money for economic regeneration, not purely for commercial gain.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. That's great. Councillor Bradman, last point on this.
Thank you, Chair. What Councillor John Williams has just said has triggered a thought in my mind on a slightly different track, if you will help me on this. It just occurs to me, do you see any change in potential for us to use more of our income from our rented properties to build more social housing at all? It has become extremely difficult to do that in recent years because of the way we are entitled to use any income from that. And I just wondered if you saw any prospect of that changing at all.
Well, that's one of the reasons why we, in previous administration, borrowed 205 million, so that we could keep our council house rents, to use them to enable us to build more council housing. Before we did that, the government was taking something like £12.5 million off of us from our council rents, and being able to keep that has meant that we've been able to develop the house building programme for social housing. But it's very complicated. We have to, and building our own housing means that we have to have a separate housing revenue account and capital account. So it's not straightforward, but that is what we do at the moment. We use council house rents. We use rents from our social housing to fund new council housing. That's basically how we raise the money to do that, which is why it's very important that when we look at council house rents, we consider the impact of raising those rents on the housing programme, because if those rents aren't raised, then we basically don't have the money to continue with our house building programme. So, you know, unlike in a private market where you can go off and borrow money, we have to use our council house rents to underwrite, and indeed right to buy income as well, use that to build more council houses. But nevertheless, I mean, we have embarked on a very ambitious council house building programme, and I'm really proud of what we've done so far in the last 4 years in greatly increasing the number of council houses that are built in this district.
Okay, great. Councillor Bradman, happy to move on.
That's fine. Thank you, Councillor Williams. That's very helpful.
Okay, thank you very much, everyone. We're going to bring that item to an end now. Thank you very much, which, as we know, was the sort of main body of our meeting. Just leaves us a couple of items to go. So, item 7 is where we are looking at future work programme, and you can see that page 43 of the pack brings us to where we are on the future work programme. And obviously, at the moment, we're on our 15th of December meeting for our medium-term financial strategy. And as we've discussed, the 10th of January meeting has now been moved to the 12th of January meeting, to the 12th of January, which is then focused on the Greater Cambridge Local Plan, with the papers, obviously, the report being issued then on the 5th of January, so right at the start of the new year. And then we have the 19th of January meeting, which, as Pete just referred to, is for budget reports and investment strategy. So both of those quite significant meetings with very important items on them. We did look at the possibility of combining them into one meeting, but it is likely that we will need at least a good couple of hours on both of those items separately, so therefore we're necessary for us to have two separate meetings on that. As you can see then, we have meetings running through February, March, April and May, and at the moment from the work programme that we obviously have the annual equality scheme there on the 20th of February, and we are going to receive the update report that we have requested on the 11th of May 2023 regarding the future use of South Cambs Hall. So that'll be approximately 6 months from the point at which we had the previous item. Now, what we also have is the task and finish group work that we are engaged in. Another meeting has been held recently, so final report recommendations from the Young People Task and Finish group to come in June. Councillor Stobart, I wonder whether you want to just give us a brief update of where the task and finish group for young people is at this point.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll give a brief summary. So we've had our third meeting, and this one was particularly significant because we were Chair, beginning to shape the programme. So from some initial thoughts of where, even defining the age range, of course, where we would like to focus our attention. We've had some very helpful input from officers and a chance to discuss where priorities lie and what we're going to do. The net result is we now have a clear picture of where we're going to talk to young people and something of the strategy as well. Well, we might say more tactics, that we're going to make that a kind of initial probe with a number of groups, see the kind of results that we're getting, and we will continue that until we settle on what we feel is a kind of a consensus viewpoint. So that's a good place to be, because I think I just had this feeling that we were going to pile up a whole series of tasks that would be difficult to do in the time that we've got available. And just to reiterate the point I think we made last time, is that we're going to aim to complete that programme of interviews and discussions between January and March. Now, of course, at this stage, we can't predict that at the end of March we will be finished, but yeah, we'll come back and report on that. But that is our aim, and that would leave us then enough time for officers to complete the report and for us to present the report to full council in July. That is our goal. But we can't legislate for everything, and there are risks. Completion of the programme is dependent upon the availability of the opportunities to speak. So we're aiming for that. That gives you an idea of the plan, and we will, of course, update you at future committee meetings.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stobart. Does any member of the committee want to ask Councillor Stobart in his role as Chair of the Task and Finish Group any questions at this point? I have Councillor Fane.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Stobart just said that you will have a clear idea of where, and I think that means when, you're going to engage with young people. I'm just wondering whether, this is the chicken and egg question, whether it has been possible to engage with young people in deciding how and when to engage with them, and if so, which young people and where you find them.
You ask a very good question, and so far I can't say, that we've got a group of young people together to ask how we should properly engage with them, but that is about the first thing that we're going to do. So I think, yeah, getting a kind of agreement with those who would, be in a supervisory role, a teaching role, and so on, in relation to the groups of young people we want to interact with. So I think we're going about it that way, as opposed to, say, we'll get a group together and ask. But I think the first thing we'll do once we meet a group, it would certainly be my intention, would be, to discuss about the mode of interaction, how we best get the results. So we've got a little more thinking to do about that. But you pose a good question, which is really let the young people set the agenda as to how those interactions take place, and I've noted that. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much, Councillor Fane. Happy to move on. Yes, marvellous. Thank you very much. I don't see any other flags or waves or offline or anything else for that one. And you'll also see in the middle column regarding the stuff that we have done in terms of putting items on the agenda, that we have to be scheduled is the stakeholder engagement item, and that one remains to be scheduled. That is the one that we haven't made a huge amount of progress on at the moment. We have the community facilities at Northstowe, but as we can see, not before October 23, so our calendar doesn't quite go up to there. And on the other item that we put on our own work programme, the planning engagement with town and parish councils, I met with Heather Jones from the planning service today and discussed the route that we would go down in that regard, and can report to committee that we will be making contact with town and parish councils at the start of January, and we'll be contacting all the councils across the whole of the South Cambs district, and we will be asking them for their engagement regarding this particular bit of work, which is what their feelings are and what their views are and what their perception is of their engagement with the planning service. And we will then either engage directly with them if that is necessary, or the idea is to have one of our meetings in let me scroll back up on my screen because I've lost the thing. So we'll obviously have our opportunity for February or March or April, that we would use one of our meetings as an opportunity for representatives of parish councils and town councils to come into the chamber with us, and that we then engage in our review of their engagement with the planning service during one of our scrutiny meetings at that point. But obviously that is still a few months away, and we will then engage with them either within that meeting or we'll be able to engage with them outside, and I will inform members more when we get to January of exactly what progress we make on that. Councillor Bradman.
Chair, thank you. All that sounds great. The only thing is that on this, it's slightly ambiguous. It's not clear if you're planning to engage with them about something or it's engagement with them about planning. And so I would just suggest we add the word planning service engagement or something like that.
Oh, I see.
Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
It's not clear if you're planning to engage with them about
yes.
talking about landscape or water resources or something. It's just to make that wording clear.
Yes, because even though obviously the P in planning is a capital letter, it is the start of the bullet points. So therefore we can't say so. No, that's absolutely fine. I'm sure Ian will update that one. So yes, so we will come back to that regard. So it may well be that I was saying to Councillor Cohn earlier, it may well be, for instance, that Fulbourn Parish Council within his ward may not be able to attend the meeting that we have, but then Councillor Cohn in his role would then perhaps have that discussion and conversation with them. So we would use members of the committee as well as inviting them to come to a meeting, which would tie in with the discussion that we've had. And I think Councillor Lovelock raised in the pre-meeting that we had regarding making sure that we were also thinking about what we talked about in terms of engaging with service providers and such like outside of the council. So therefore it also moves us forward on that moment as well. Is there any questions anyone wish to ask regarding the work programme and the calendar that we have? No? Okay, so which brings us to note the date of the next meeting, and the date of our next meeting, as we have discussed, is actually now the Thursday the 12th of January, which will be specifically focused on the Greater Cambridge Local Plan. And we don't have any need for exclusion of press or public, so I don't have any items in that regard. And as I always do at this point, I will turn to Ian, and I will ask Ian if there is anything that we have not covered, that we should have covered, or anything that you need to tell us or say.
Nothing more.
Nothing more, excellent. As I've said to members before, I do always have this fear that I close the meeting and Ian waves at me vigorously and tells me I've missed out the most important thing we had to do. So, thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for your attendance. We have managed to finish ahead of 7 o'clock this evening, which obviously is a good thing, but I feel we have still spent a robust and significant amount of time in relation to the forward economic plan. Can I thank Councillor John Williams as Cabinet Member Present for all of his answers and work, as well as our officers. And as we come to the end of 2022, we look forward to an enjoyable holiday season and moving into more scrutiny work in 2023.